Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Emma Gillespie.
I'm Billi FitzSimons.
There's been a huge shift in the way sex and sexual identity are represented on screen over the past decade. Think about your favourite films, your favourite TV shows. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. In the wake of Hollywood's Me Too reckoning, intimacy coordinators have become an increasing presence on film and television sets. But what does an intimacy coordinator actually do?
I am so fascinated by this topic because watching people have sex on the screen is kind of something that happens all the time in TV and in movies. Mm-hmm. And you don't often think about what went into making that scene work.
Exactly.
And so when you pitched this idea of interviewing an intimacy coordinator, I was like, yes, of course, because I'm sure once you think about it, there would be so many questions.
And the work that they do, whether or not we realize it at the time, really does influence so much of the media that we consume every single day. So I wanted to get to the bottom of this and answer all our questions. So I'm speaking to Aleks Trkulja. She is a certified sex and relationship therapist, founder of the Pleasure Center, and she works as an intimacy coordinator herself. Aleks Trkulja joins us now. Aleks, welcome to the Daily Aus. We're really excited to be chatting to you today.
Thank you for having me. It's so wonderful to be here.
We have seen such a huge shift in how sexuality is showcased on screen in film and television over the last few years. But before we get into why that is, can you explain a little bit about the world of intimacy coordination and how it actually works and how you've experienced it yourself?
Absolutely. So intimacy coordination is essentially choreographing consent around intimate scenes in TV and film. It's kind of like a stunts coordinator or a fight coordinator on set. So you're there to essentially make sure that the performers, the cast, the crew, all feel safe as you go to choreograph certain scenes.
And how do you make actors feel safe on set? What does that actually look like in practice?
That's a really good question. So quite simply, before you are on set and filming a scene, you're having conversations ahead of time to discuss certain boundaries, certain like what's a yes, what's a maybe, what's like a hard no in terms of, I guess, what the scene might require of performers. And I think as well, you're discussing with the rest of the team, what is it that we're trying to portray with this scene in terms of how it complements storytelling around sex, intimacy, a character's journey or growth, and kind of blocking the scene. So you'll get together with performers if you have the luxury of time to kind of go through what is it that we'd like to sort of do in this scene. Depending on what kind of production you're on and the time limits, sometimes as the intimacy coordinator, you're given kind of like most of the, I guess, creative direction of like, okay, help us choreograph this to like specific details. Other times you are working with performers to just kind of be in the background and go, you guys do your thing. I'm here if you need me. So really you are just setting it up beforehand. And so when you're on set on the day, things can kind of just move really smoothly and everybody feels safe and comfortable. And I guess with that consent and communication, it creates space for performers to feel really safe and then be able to just move creatively through their work.
As portrayals of sex and sexuality on screen have kind of become more candid or transparent or more realistic in recent years, has that made the role of intimacy coordination harder or even more important?
I would say even more important because I guess as a sex therapist as well, in private practice, I talk a lot with clients around how much media not only reflects culture, but actually teaches us about intimacy. So many people come into private practice learning about sex as like this passionate thing through the TV shows or the movies that they've seen. So as an intimacy coordinator, it's really fascinating to be on the other end of that spectrum, to be informing the kinds of narratives around sex and intimacy that ultimately do impress upon people. So yeah, I think it's kind of this fascinating influence on us that the more realistic sex and intimacy portrayed on screen becomes, the more, I guess, important the role of an intimacy coordinator can be.
I want to talk about shows like Heated Rivalry and Bridgerton, of course, topical at the moment. There is this discourse around inclusion and accessibility and representation with shows like that.
Mm-hmm.
How have they changed conversations around sex and sexuality on screen?
I guess shows like Bridgerton and Heated Rivalry are really important in portraying to us, I guess, more like visibility or representation in like what queer intimacy can look like, but also I would say what intimacy looks like through more of a female gaze. So traditionally, a lot of the sex and intimacy on screen has kind of represented more of like, this is a massive generalization, but men's experience of desire, which is that it is quite spontaneous, it's passionate. The research shows that things like the dual control model of desire, it really demonstrates to us that that's not true of most women. Most women will experience desire as more responsive. It takes time, there's a build-up, there's context, there's eroticism that's fundamental to desire being present. And so shows like Bridgerton and Heated Rivalry, where we're seeing that like yearning and slow burn, I think is really landing for a lot of people who resonate with elements of that experience of romance.
Yeah, so there's more of a female gaze being represented in how these scenes play out. But the role of women in sex on screen has also changed significantly over the past decade, even the past few years. Can you walk us through a little bit about that changing role?
Hey guys, this is my friend Rosa. Say hi, Rosa.
Hi, Rosa.
She's cooking up the deep dive video that you're watching right now. Rosa, what do you want them to do?
Subscribe.
You heard the woman. Now back to the video.
Yeah, I guess it's changed in a variety of different ways, but I think, even having something as simple as more female writers or directors helping to shape the storytelling of female desire and sex on screen is moving us away from men's perceptions of female desire and sex, which is, perceived through the male lens. So I guess it's, when we have shows like Girls or even just like looking at Wuthering Heights, like that's going to be the hottest, movie that we'll be talking about for the coming months. There's just this portrayal, I guess, of women and sex on screen that is becoming, I guess, more realistic of how women are experiencing their own sexuality and desire, and not just in like a liberated way, but also the challenges surrounding that, whether it is around being able to speak up confidently or prioritizing your own pleasure. I think seeing more of, the female sex experience on screen is also going to be able to kind of resonate with a lot of viewers, and hopefully they can kind of watch it and be like, oh, wow, like that's me. I see myself in that. And I think as a sex therapist as well, how that's really important is that sometimes a lot of my female clients will struggle to articulate what is it that they want or need. And they almost use these movies or TV shows as like a kind of like a diving board to be like, okay, that scene in Bridgerton when he does that thing, like that's what I'm like looking for. Or that's how I want to feel with someone. And so it can be really powerful in that way.
Yeah, there's a lot more conversation that you can have about a scene like that compared to, those of us who grew up watching rom-coms where maybe a guy and a girl look at each other, they roll off a couch, they roll into a bed, everything's perfect, they finish at the same time, it's done and dusted, they live happily ever after.
If only it worked that way.
I want to talk a little bit about consent as well, which you've mentioned, and how to represent consent on screen. I think the first show that comes to mind for me here is Normal People from a few years ago now, but that for me was one of the first shows that I remember seeing an active conversation about consent in the moment that was actually really beautiful, if I can say that maybe we have these preconceptions that a consent conversation in the middle of a romantic show or film will ruin the moment, but that really sort of proved you can have those conversations. What are your thoughts about consent on screen?
Oh, I think it's fundamental. Like I've mentioned, I think media is not only informed by culture, but teaches us about consent and sex culture. And so it is fundamental, I think, in storytelling to portray the reality that consent isn't something that ruins the mood. It is not something that will lead to rejection or, I guess, whatever it is that people worry it might lead to. If anything, seeing consent on screen is the really important sex education representation I think our society needs, especially for younger people, to have it normalized. Even though, yes, it is storytelling, it is not necessarily reality. It is giving people language. It is giving people examples of, hold on, this is within the realm of possibility. And Normal People, such a brilliant show, so heart-wrenching. I loved it. And yes, I think that show portrays consent really well. I think even shows like Sex Education, we're really starting to like build on exploring consent in different ways. So I think it's fundamental to informing us and having it represented openly as just a normal part of sex and relationships.
Do you think those conversations have become a normal part of production for, people bringing together new stories to tell on screen? Is there more work to do, or is intimacy coordination now ingrained in those processes?
Intimacy coordination is not ingrained in the processes, so it's still not a compulsory position on set, which my imagination is that it will become one. You can kind of look at like the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni kind of court case situation where you can see that it's not even just for the sake of the performers and their comfortability or just the storytelling choreography element. There's also liability issues. So in terms of my role as an intimacy coordinator, there's this element of being able to be a middle person to production and performers and cast, that like I'm kind of reporting and being like, okay, this is like someone reported this issue on set, or someone reported this dynamic, or someone reported, like I'm almost there as a witness to any further complications. Hopefully that doesn't happen, and I've not had to be in that situation before. But I do think that we will probably see intimacy coordinators become more compulsory on set, in the same way that it's compulsory if you're having like, a Tom Cruise or like Keanu Reeves, John Wick, like fight action movie with guns and weapons and stunts. It's going to be compulsory to have coordinators on there to help make sure everything is safe and smooth.
One of the big questions I think people might have about the intimacy coordination work you do, but maybe they feel embarrassed to ask it, is around the kind of inherent awkwardness, I suppose, that would maybe play out on set. While we might see something that feels really fluid as an edited product in an episode or a movie, how do you overcome that maybe awkwardness or timidness on set? How do actors overcome that too?
I think actors are really incredible at putting their bodies in situations that I guess like don't feel natural. It is performative by nature. I also think that a lot of the performers I've worked with have like musical theater background. And if you've ever worked with musical theater kiddies, like they are just so open and willing. They're very good at creating connection. We often do like little warm-up exercises, especially if the performers haven't been working together for very long and then they have to jump into an intimate scene. You can do some kind of like warm-up exercises, blocking the scenes so there's no like kissing straight away, but rather just moving through the motions of what the scene will look like can really help. But I guess on top of that, the awkwardness of filming a sex scene. A lot of people think, oh, it must be so awkward. Like if it's, what if you get turned on, or what if someone's body reacts in certain ways? But the reality is that I think it's kind of like way less sexy than you think it's going to be a lot of the times, because it's still like a choreography. So your job is to also be looking at like where is your body part going to be for how long, and what's the camera angle. So actors are not only kissing, but they're also thinking the camera's moving here and I've got to move my body on this beat, and then then we pull away. And so it's a lot of thinking. I think as well we do kind of just name any awkwardness that might come up of like, yeah, this is vulnerable. What do we need in those situations? So that's where an intimacy coordinator can be helpful, because if someone is kind of like, hey, like I'm feeling this, or this is my body's reacting, I'm uncomfortable, I can kind of be there to be like, hey, let's call a quick break. Like, we just need to reset for a second. So that's kind of how we manage the awkward moments.
What's something about your job that you think might surprise people, or maybe a misconception around what you do?
That's a really good question. What is a misconception? I guess a misconception about my job as an intimacy coordinator is that it's like a very maybe horny job. Like, that sounds so weird, but like, I know we're talking about sex a lot, or we're blocking sex, but really it's like a very creative process. And I would say it's about safety and consent over anything else. And the storytelling around sex is kind of something that you're working as a team together to do, and really comes down, like the performers really carry all of that.
Aleks Trkulja, it's been fascinating to chat to you. Thank you so much for sharing a bit of your world with us here at the Daily Aus.
Thank you so much for having me.
That is all we've got time for today, but I did want to say a huge thank you to Aleks Trkulja for joining us on the podcast. And if you want to hear more stories like this, more interviews and conversations like this, we actually have a culture newsletter. It drops every Thursday afternoon. You can sign up for free at the link in the episode description.